Chapter 1. Friday Night Casualties. Jiwoo had exactly one rule for surviving corporate life. Never let the office see you cry. He'd kept that rule intact for 3 years, through 2 rounds of layoffs, one incompetent manager who took credit for his work, and a quarterly report that had taken him 4 sleepless nights to finish. Tonight, though, the rule was hanging by a thread, because his director had just rejected the same report for the 3rd time, scrawling "redo, this lacks vision" across the cover page in red ink like it was a crime scene at by 8 p.m. Jiwoo had abandoned his rule and his desk in favor of the nearest bar, a dim, narrow place 2 blocks from his office called Low Tide, the kind of establishment that existed solely to absorb the disappointments of salarymen. He ordered a whiskey, then another, and tried very hard not to think about vision or red ink, or the fact that he was 28 and already felt like a husk of a person. "You look like you're trying to drink a building down," someone said. Jiwoo turned. The voice belonged to a young man perched on the stool beside him. Sharp-jawed, dark-eyed, dressed with the kind of effortless quality that didn't come from a department store rack, though nothing about him screamed money. If anything, he had the soft, slightly rumpled look of someone who'd been sitting in a library for 6 hours and decided, on a whim, that tonight called for a drink. "I'm trying to drink a director down," Jiwoo said. "Failing so far." The stranger laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of him. "I'm Seo Yoonjae," he said, offering a hand. "University. Friend dragged me out because apparently I study too much and live too little." He gestured vaguely toward the other end of the bar, where a cluster of loud 20-somethings were taking shots and shrieking over something on someone's phone. Jiwoo, he replied, shaking the offered hand. It was warm, and the grip lingered a half-second longer than necessary. "Office worker. Apparently I work too much and complain too little, if you ask my coworkers. If you ask me, I complain exactly the right amount." "What field?" Jiwoo hesitated, the old habit of corporate vagueness kicking in. "Strategy and planning. Boring stuff. Spreadsheets that lie to you about being important." Yoonjae tilted his head, studying him with an attentiveness that felt almost unfair, given how many drinks Jiwoo had already had. "You don't look bored. You look tired in a specific way, like something keeps almost going right and then doesn't." Jiwoo blinked. "That's annoyingly accurate for someone I just met. I'm good at reading people, bad at reading textbooks, evidently, hence the library marathon." Yoonjae waved the bartender over and ordered something dark and sweet-smelling. "What's your director's deal? The one you're trying to drown." And that was how it started. Not with anything dramatic, just 2 strangers complaining about their respective tyrannies. Jiwoo's tyrant, a balding man named Director O who communicated exclusively in passive-aggressive memos. Yoonjae's tyrant, a thesis advisor who kept suggesting he add 40 more pages to something that was already, by any sane measurement, finished. The drinks kept coming. The conversation kept widening, drifting from work complaints into stranger, looser territory, childhood pets, the worst foods they'd ever eaten on a dare, whether or not constellations were a scam invented by ancient people with nothing better to do. Yoonjae's friends eventually left without him, calling something about "don't wait up over their shoulders," which Yoonjae waved off without looking. Too absorbed in arguing with Jiwoo about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, Jiwoo was militantly against it. Yoonjae found this hilarious and personally offensive. By midnight, the bar had thinned out, and Jiwoo had lost track of how many drinks separated him from sober. What he hadn't lost track of was the way Yoonjae's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the way his sleeve had ridden up to reveal a thin silver bracelet on his wrist, or the unbearable, dangerous fact that he hadn't thought about Director O in over 2 hours. "You have a very honest face," Yoonjae said at some point, leaning closer than the conversation strictly required. "It's doing a lot of things right now." "What's it doing?" "Deciding whether to do something stupid." Jiwoo huffed a laugh into his glass. "I'm a strategy and planning guy. I don't do stupid things. I do calculated risks that look stupid from the outside." "Calculate this risk, then," Yoonjae said, and didn't move away. Jiwoo did the math. The math came back unhelpful. All variables drowned in whiskey, and the particular loneliness of a Friday night spent alone with strangers who happened to be kind to him. He leaned in instead of away. Neither of them spoke again for a while. Chapter 2. Taking Responsibility. Jiwoo woke up with sunlight slicing through unfamiliar curtains, a headache that throbbed in time with his pulse, and an arm draped over his waist that did not belong to him. He went very still. Memory arrived in fragments. The bar, the whiskey, the argument about pineapple, the cab ride where they'd kept laughing about nothing, the door of an apartment he didn't recognize, hands and warmth and a night that had felt, even through the haze, less like a drunken mistake and more like falling into something he hadn't known he was looking for. The arm around him tightened slightly. "You're thinking very loudly?" Yoonjae's voice mumbled into his shoulder, rough with sleep. "I can hear it." Jiwoo turned over carefully, propping himself on an elbow to look at the younger man, and younger was doing a lot of work, because in the morning light, without the bar's forgiving dimness, Yoonjae looked exactly as young as he'd claimed. A university student. Jiwoo was, by his own quick calculation, at least 5 years older. Panic arrived late but full force. We shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I should have stopped this. You're a student. I'm Jiwoo SSI. Yoonjae's voice was calm, amused even, utterly unbothered by the spiraling. I'm 22. I'm not a child. And for the record, I made the first move. So if anyone owes an apology here, it's me. That doesn't matter. I'm older. I should have had better judgment. Jiwoo dragged a hand down his face, mortification curdling with something else. Something warmer that he didn't want to examine. Look, I'll take responsibility for this. Yoonjae's eyebrows lifted. Take responsibility. What does that mean exactly? Are you going to marry me? Jiwoo SSI. He said it teasingly, clearly expecting Jiwoo to backpedal. Laugh it off. Treat the whole thing as a one-time, never speak of it again blur. But Jiwoo, despite the headache and the panic and the very real possibility that he had ruined a stranger's morning, found himself saying, with more sincerity than the situation probably warranted, "If that's what it takes, then fine. I don't do things halfway. If we did something, I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen and walk away like a coward." For a moment Yoonjae just looked at him. Something shifted behind his eyes, soft and startled, like he hadn't expected anyone to actually mean it. What Jiwoo didn't know, couldn't have known, not from a single night at a bar where Yoonjae had deliberately, carefully avoided mentioning anything about his family, was that Yoonjae had decided, somewhere between the second drink and the third, that he was in love. Not in the dramatic, overblown way people described in dramas, but in the quiet, certain way of recognizing something he hadn't known he needed until it sat down next to him and complained about a director named O. Yoonjae had grown up surrounded by people who wanted things from him. His name, his family's company, his future, and Jiwoo, stressed and disheveled and utterly unaware of any of that, had wanted nothing except someone to argue about pizza toppings with. "Okay," Yoonjae said finally, voice light but eyes serious. "Take responsibility then. Give me your number." Jiwoo blinked. "That's it? That's the responsibility you want?" "For now," Yoonjae said, smiling in a way that made Jiwoo's stomach do something complicated. "I'll let you know if I think of anything else." They exchanged numbers over reheated coffee and the kind of awkward, charged silence that came after intimacy neither of them had fully processed yet. Jiwoo left that morning telling himself it was a one-time thing, an aberration, a story he'd never repeat to anyone at the office. He believed this for approximately 4 days, right up until Yoonjae texted him a photo of a dog he'd seen on campus with the caption, "This dog has more direction in life than my thesis." And Jiwoo found himself smiling at his phone in the middle of a meeting like an idiot. Chapter 3. The Slow Creep of Habit. Started small. A message here, a reply there, Yoonjae sending photos of increasingly absurd campus bulletin board flyers. Lost. 1. Existential crisis. Reward if found. Jiwoo sending back complaints about meetings that could have been emails. 2 messages a day became 3. 3 became a running commentary on each other's lives, delivered in fragments throughout the day like a radio show neither of them remembered signing up to host. They met up properly 2 weeks after that first night. Coffee, ostensibly, though it stretched into a 4-hour wander through a used bookstore where Yoonjae bought 3 books he didn't need and Jiwoo bought one he pretended he didn't want. Then it was dinner the following week. Then it was a walk along the river because Yoonjae declared he needed a break from being a productive member of society. And Jiwoo, despite himself, cleared his schedule to go. "You're doing the thing again," Yoonjae said one evening in March, the two of them sitting on a bench with convenience store ramen cups steaming between them, because Yoonjae had insisted real food was a betrayal of the riverside ramen experience. "What thing?" "The thing where you go quiet and your jaw gets tight. That's your work face. Tell me what Director O did this time." Jiwoo exhaled, long and tired. "He took my proposal, the one I worked on for 3 weeks, and presented it to the board as his own vision. Didn't even change the formatting. Just stood up there and took credit like it cost him nothing. He stabbed at his noodles with more force than necessary. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, someone would notice. Now I think the company just runs on whoever's willing to be exploited the loudest." Yoonjae listened, really listened. The way he always did. Like Jiwoo's complaints about an obscure mid-sized company were the most fascinating thing he'd heard all week. "What's the company called again? You've never actually told me the name." "Daerim Group, subsidiary Daerim Innovations, the tech and strategy division." "Doesn't matter. It's not exactly a household name." Jiwoo shrugged. "You wouldn't have heard of it." Something flickered across Yoonjae's face. There and gone so fast Jiwoo nearly missed it, distracted by his noodles and his grievances. "No," Yoonjae said slowly. "I don't think I have." It was technically not a lie. Yoonjae had simply never had reason to discuss Daerim Group by name with his own family, because his grandfather, Chairman Seo, referred to it only as the company, in the particular tone reserved for things that were simply assumed, like the sun rising or taxes existing. Daerim Group was not just a company Yoonjae's family owned a piece of. It was the company, the conglomerate his grandfather had built from a single textile factory 60 years ago, the empire Yoonjae was, as the only grandson with any interest in the business side of things, quietly being groomed to eventually run. But Yoonjae had spent his entire life being the heir before he was a person. Handled carefully by relatives angling for favor, courted by classmates who wanted proximity to his family's name, watched by tutors and bodyguards and well-meaning aunts who all saw the company first and him second. Jiwoo didn't know any of that. Jiwoo just complained about his boss and asked if Yoonjae wanted extra kimchi on the side. Yoonjae said nothing about the connection. Not that night, not in the weeks after. He told himself it was because it didn't matter yet. He wasn't there yet, wasn't a director, wasn't anyone Jiwoo needed to worry about. He told himself the omission was protective, not deceptive. Mostly, though, if he was honest with himself in the dark of his dorm room at 2 a.m., he simply didn't want this. Jai was unguarded, irritated, completely unspecial way of talking to him, to change. He'd spent 22 years being someone's heir. He wanted, for once, to just be someone's person. So the messages kept coming, easy and constant, threading through their days like a second heartbeat. Jiwoo complained about Director O's memos. Yoonjae complained about his advisor's footnote obsession. Jiwoo sent a photo of a sad desk lunch. Yoonjae sent back a photo of an even sadder library vending machine sandwich, captioned, "I win." They didn't call it dating, not out loud, not for a while. It simply became the unquestioned architecture of their week, the way breathing was unquestioned, the way Jiwoo started reaching for his phone first thing in the morning not out of dread for work email but in hope of a good morning message, the way Yoonjae started structuring his study schedule around when Jiwoo's lunch break fell. Neither of them named it. Both of them knew exactly what it was. Chapter 4: What Neither of Them Said. By early summer, 6 months in, it had stopped being something either of them could pretend wasn't happening. They were, by any reasonable definition, together, they just hadn't had the conversation where they said so, both of them circling the label with the particular cowardice of people who were already certain of the feeling and terrified of jinxing it by naming it too soon. Jiwoo had met 2 of Yoonjae's university friends, who'd taken one look at the way Yoonjae lit up around him, and immediately started a group chat called Operation Get Them to just say it already. Yoonjae had not met any of Jiwoo's co-workers, mostly because Jiwoo kept his personal life walled off from Daerim with the same fierce privacy he kept everything else. But he'd heard enough. Director O's latest outrage, the colleague who microwaved fish in the break room, the ongoing saga of a project called Initiative Horizon that seemed to exist mainly to give upper management something to argue about in meetings, that he sometimes felt like he worked there too. They're restructuring the strategy division. Jiwoo told him one night, sprawled on Yoonjae's dorm room floor because Yoonjae's roommate was out and they'd ordered too much food to eat at a table like civilized people. Apparently corporates bringing in someone from outside to head it. Everyone's panicking. Director O's been insufferable. Convinced he's getting demoted. Would that upset you? If he got demoted, I'd cry actual tears of joy, Jiwoo said, deadpan. And Yoonjae laughed so hard he nearly choked on his noodles. What's the company's deal, anyway? Yoonjae asked once he'd recovered, picking idly at his food. He asked this kind of question often now, careful and oblique, fishing gently for information about a world he technically already knew everything about. Family run? Public? You've never really said. Family conglomerate, originally. 3 generations now, the founder's grandson is supposedly going to take over eventually, though nobody in my division has ever actually seen him. Some mysterious heir off at university somewhere, probably skiing in Switzerland on the company's dime, while the rest of us actually work. Jiwoo rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Honestly, must be nice. Born into money, never have to claw for anything. I used to resent people like that. Now I just feel sorry for whoever has to deal with him when he finally shows up and starts rearranging everyone's lives because he read a business book once. Yoonjae went very quiet, suddenly extremely focused on his noodles. You okay? Jiwoo asked. Fine, Yoonjae said, a half-beat too fast. Just thinking about footnotes. Jiwoo, who had no reason to doubt this. Yoonjae was, after all, perpetually thinking about footnotes. Let it go, and the moment passed, swallowed by easier conversation, by Yoonjae stealing food off his plate, by the particular comfort that had built up between them over months of unremarkable evenings that had somehow become the best part of both their weeks. What Jiwoo didn't know was that Yoonjae had been the one to push for the restructuring of the strategy division, in a single offhand conversation with his grandfather 6 weeks earlier, not maliciously, not even consciously connecting it to Jiwoo at the time, but because his coursework in organizational strategy had made him genuinely curious about Darum's internal structure, and his grandfather, delighted by any flicker of business interest from his notoriously academic grandson, had taken the comment and run with it through the board. Yoonjae hadn't thought much of it then. He thought about it constantly now, lying awake doing math he didn't want to do, watching a quiet dread accumulate at the edge of every conversation about the mysterious heir. He should tell Jiwoo. He knew he should. Every week that passed without telling him made the eventual telling heavier, the omission less like privacy and more like something it would take a very different word to describe. But Yoonjae kept finding reasons to wait. Finals, then summer break, then the very reasonable observation that nothing official had happened yet, that he wasn't actually a director, that there was still time. There was, in fact, less time than he thought. Chapter 5, Director Seo. Graduation came in February, 8 months after the night at low tide. Jiwoo attended. Sitting in the audience with a bouquet of flowers he'd agonized over for 20 minutes in a shop near the venue. Watching Yoonjae cross the stage in his cap and gown with a swell of pride so unfamiliar it almost embarrassed him. Afterward, Yoonjae had hugged him so hard he'd nearly dropped the flowers, laughing into his shoulder, and Jiwoo had thought, with the clear, simple certainty of someone finally admitting a truth he'd been avoiding. I love this person. I'm going to tell him so soon. He did not get the chance to say it that week. 3 weeks later, Dayrim Innovations called an all-staff meeting on a Monday morning, the kind that emptied every floor into the main auditorium with the specific dread of people who knew something was about to change and had no say in how. Director O stood at the podium, sweating through his collar, and announced, with the strained cheer of a man delivering news he personally hated, that the board had appointed a new director to head the restructured strategy division, effective immediately. Please welcome, Director O said, gesturing toward the wings of the stage with the enthusiasm of a man chewing glass. Director Seo Yoonjae. Jiwoo's stomach dropped through the floor before his brain had even finished processing the name. Yoonjae walked out in a suit Jiwoo had never seen, dark and impeccably tailored, looking, for the first time since Jiwoo had known him, like exactly what he apparently was. Composed, confident, utterly at ease standing in front of 300 employees who'd spent the morning gossiping about who this mysterious new director might be. He gave a short, polished introduction, thanked the board, thanked the staff for their hard work, expressed eagerness to build on the strong foundation already in place. And Jiwoo heard almost none of it, his ears ringing with a single, furious thought. Mysterious Heir off skiing in Switzerland, born into money, never has to claw for anything. He'd said those words to Yoonjae's face, repeatedly. The meeting ended. Jiwoo did not go up to say hello. He went back to his desk, sat down very carefully, and stared at his monitor without seeing it for the better part of an hour, while around him the office buzzed with speculation about the new director's age. So young, barely older than some of the interns, and whether he was single, and whether he was as terrifyingly competent as his opening remarks had suggested. His phone buzzed. "Yoonjae, can we talk? Please." Jiwoo did not reply for the rest of the day. That evening, Yoonjae was waiting outside Jiwoo's apartment building. No longer in the suit, back in the soft, rumpled cardigan that Jiwoo associated with library marathons and riverside ramen. Looking smaller than he had on that stage. Looking, for once, genuinely afraid. "You lied to me?" Jiwoo said, before Yoonjae had gotten a single word out. His voice was low, controlled in the specific way that meant he was holding something back from being much louder. "For almost a year, you sat there and let me complain about your family's company, let me call your grandson of the founder self a spoiled rich kid skiing on the company dime, and you just found it funny? Found it cute? Watching me make a fool of myself. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Yoonjae? Because from where I'm standing, you let me think you were some broke university student so I'd feel sorry for you. So I'd..." Jiwoo's voice cracked and he hated it. Hated that even now, furious, his body still wanted to reach for him. "I thought you needed someone. I thought... God. I thought I was taking care of someone who didn't have anyone else. And the whole time you were a third-generation billionaire who could buy and sell my entire division without blinking. I never let you think I needed taking care of because I wanted pity," Yoonjae said. And there was real desperation in his voice now, the polish from the stage entirely gone. "I let you treat me like a person, Jiwoo. Do you understand how rare that's been for me? My whole life? Everyone who's ever been nice to me wanted something. My name, my money, access to my grandfather. You wanted to argue with me about pineapple on pizza. You yelled at me for ordering the wrong size Americano. Nobody does that to the heir of Daerim Group. They did it to me. I didn't tell you because the second I did, I was scared you'd start being careful with me. Polite, like everyone else. That wasn't your choice to make for me," Jiwoo said, quieter now, but no less hurt. "You didn't get to decide what I deserved to know about the person I was." He stopped himself before the word love could escape. "Not ready. Not here. Not in the middle of being this angry." "You're right," Yoonjae said. "I should have told you. I wanted to so many times I just kept finding reasons not to, and the longer I waited the more it felt impossible to bring up. And I know that's not an excuse, I know I hurt you and I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Jiwoo." He stepped closer, hands trembling slightly at his sides, like he wanted to reach for him and didn't trust himself to. "But I need you to know none of it was a performance. The night at the bar, the river, the bookstore, every single message. That was just me. The real me. The company is just a thing I was born into. It was never the reason I wanted to be near you." Jiwoo looked at him for a long moment. Really looked, past the anger, at the face he'd grown to know better than his own these past months. The face that had laughed at his terrible jokes and listened to his complaints and held him through bad weeks without once asking for anything in return. "I need space," Jiwoo said finally. "Not forever. Just, I need to figure out how to be in the same building as you tomorrow without everyone watching me lose my mind. I need time, Yoonjae." Yoonjae nodded, throat working. "Okay," he said. "I'll wait, however long it takes." Chapter 6. Office Hours. For 2 weeks the distance held, careful, professional, painful. Yoonjae did not push. He sent no messages beyond the occasional, scrupulously work-appropriate email, copied to the rest of the strategy team, about deadlines and deliverables. In meetings, he addressed Jiwoo as Hanasasai with the same even courtesy he extended to everyone else, and if his eyes lingered a half-second too long when Jiwoo spoke, nobody but Jiwoo seemed to notice that it was, in its own way, worse than fighting. Jiwoo had grown used to a version of his life that had Yoonjae woven all through it. Morning messages, evening calls. A steady warm presence at the edge of every day, and its sudden absence left a silence that working through old anger did nothing to fill. He found himself rereading old messages at night, the photo of the lost existential crisis flyer, the increasingly unhinged commentary on Riverside ramen, and feeling something in his chest twist tighter every time. The thing that finally cracked it open was, fittingly, a memo. Jiwoo's latest proposal, the redesigned client engagement framework he'd been quietly perfecting for months. The one Director O had repeatedly rejected for lacking vision, landed on Director Seo's desk along with 24 others as part of the division handover. 3 days later, Jiwoo was called into the director's office, certain he was about to be told, politely and devastatingly, that his work needed yet another revision. Instead, Yoonjae stood up from behind the desk the moment he entered, all the careful professional distance falling away. "This is the best strategic framework I've seen come out of this division in a year," he said, holding up the proposal, visibly fighting to keep his voice in director mode and failing. "I'm implementing it division-wide with your name on it, properly credited this time. I should have seen this on day one. I'm sorry it took me 3 days into the job to read what should have been on the board's desk months ago." Jiwoo stood there, momentarily thrown by the abrupt collision of his two separate worlds. The boyfriend he'd loved and the director he resented. Suddenly the same astonished, sincere person standing in front of him. "You don't have to do that because of us," he said carefully. "I'm not," Yoonjae said. "I'm doing it because it's good work and you deserve credit for it. The two things aren't related, except that loving you is probably why I actually bothered to read every page instead of skimming it like everyone else clearly did." He set the proposal down, hands not quite steady. "I meant what I said outside your apartment. I'll wait as long as it takes. But I needed you to know, professionally, personally, all of it, that I see you. I've always seen you. That part was never a lie." Something in Jiwoo's chest, held tight and aching for 2 weeks, finally loosened. "You used the word loving," he said quietly. "I did," Yoonjae said, not backing down from it. "I love you, Jiwoo. I loved you the morning after that night at the bar, when you said you'd take responsibility without knowing a single real thing about me, just because you meant it. I've loved you through every terrible workday complaint and every Riverside ramen cup since. I should have told you who I was a long time ago. I never should have hidden that the love was real." Jiwoo crossed the office in 3 steps and kissed him. Not carefully, not with the restraint of 2 weeks of professional distance, but with the full, relieved force of someone who'd missed this more than he'd let himself admit. Yoonjae made a soft, startled sound against his mouth before melting into it, one hand coming up to cradle the back of Jiwoo's neck like he was afraid this was a dream he might wake from. "I'm still angry," Jiwoo murmured when they finally broke apart, foreheads resting together. "Properly angry. You're going to be making it up to me for a while. I have a company's worth of resources at my disposal," Yoonjae said, breathless and grinning. "I'm prepared to make it up to you extensively. Don't think you can buy your way out of this with money, Director Seo. Wasn't planning to. Was thinking more along the lines of never lying to you again, and possibly an apology dinner that goes on for several months." They kept it quiet at first, careful, given the optics of a director dating someone in his own division, given how fresh the wound of the deception still was for both of them privately. But quiet things have a way of becoming visible anyway. Coworkers noticed the way Director Seo's schedule mysteriously cleared whenever Han-SSI's did. They noticed the lingering glances in meetings, the suspiciously specific knowledge each had of the other's coffee order, the fact that Han Jiwoo, notoriously private, had started smiling at his phone during lunch in a way nobody had ever seen before. Office gossip, once it catches a thread, is relentless. Within a month, half the strategy division had a working theory, and by 2 months, most of the building did too. Neither of them confirmed it outright until a junior staffer, emboldened by months of rumor, asked directly during an all-hands meeting whether the director and Han-SSI were a thing. The room went very quiet. Yoonjae, to his credit, didn't flinch. "Yes," he said simply, with the same composed clarity he brought to quarterly reports. "Han Jiwoo and I are together. I should have said so earlier, but I wanted to be sure it was something I handled with the care it deserves. rather than as office gossip. I'm telling you now because I'd rather you hear it from me than continue speculating in the break room. A beat, then with a small, helpless smile that undercut all the director composure. He's also, for the record, the most talented strategist in this building, and I will be taking feedback on that assessment from no one. The room broke into startled laughter. Then applause. Genuine warm. The particular delight of an office that had clearly been rooting for this outcome for weeks. Jiwoo, mortified and grinning despite himself from the back of the room, decided he could forgive Yoonjae quite a lot for that. Chapter 7, Closed Circle. They got married 18 months after that night at low tide had first tipped, unplanned and unstoppable, into something neither of them had been looking for. It was a small ceremony. Deliberately so, held in a quiet garden venue an hour outside the city rather than any of the grand banquet halls Yoonjae's family could easily have commandeered. Chairman Seo, predictably, had grumbled about the lack of spectacle befitting the future of Dae-rim, but had relented the moment he met Jiwoo properly, won over in the end, not by status or polish but by the fact that Jiwoo had argued with him, gently but without hesitation, about a misallocated budget line in the company's community outreach program over dinner, treating the old man's title with respect but not deference. He doesn't want anything from me except for me to admit when I'm wrong. The chairman had told Yoonjae afterward, sounding faintly bewildered. Keep that one. The guest list was short, curated entirely from people who mattered rather than people who needed to be seen mattering. Yoonjae's university friends, the same ones who'd run the operation, get them to just say it already, group chat, and never let either of them forget it. A handful of Jiwoo's closest co-workers, the ones who'd watched the whole office romance unfold in real time and considered themselves, not without justification, partial architects of it. Both their families, small and unshowy, sitting together under string lights strung between trees. Jiwoo's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Director Oh, invited at Jiwoo's own insistence in a gesture of magnanimity Jiwoo still occasionally regretted, gave a toast so awkward and overlong that it somehow looped back around to being genuinely touching. Yoonjae's grandfather, asked to say a few words, instead simply raised his glass and said, "My grandson spent 22 years being careful with everyone. I'm glad he finally found someone he didn't have to be careful with," which made Yoonjae have to excuse himself briefly to compose his face. At the center of it, through all the toasts and the string lights and the slightly too long ceremony, were two men who had met by accident on the worst Friday of one ordinary week, who'd built something real out of complaints about bad bosses and arguments about pizza toppings, who'd weathered a deception and the anger that followed it and come out the other side choosing each other anyway, deliberately, with full knowledge of who the other actually was. You know, Jiwoo murmured during their first dance, low enough that only Yoonjae could hear, "If you'd told me that night at the bar you were going to be my boss someday, I never would have let you buy me that second whiskey. Good thing I didn't tell you." "Then," Yoonjae said, smiling against his temple, "I'd have missed out on the best decision of my life." Taking responsibility? Taking responsibility, Yoonjae agreed. Best calculated risk I ever took that looked stupid from the outside. Around them, their closest people laughed and danced under string lights, and Han Jiwoo, strategist, ex-stress drinker, accidental husband to the heir of Dae-rim Group, decided that some risks, in the end, were worth every uncalculated, messy, complicated moment. End.